Hey, Dan Passarelli here. S&P 500 off 1.64% today, and that turns it into one of the worst performing trading weeks we've had in a while. Why is that? Well, we talked about some of this yesterday, and there's a lot more to talk about today. We had non-farm payrolls out this morning, and there were fewer jobs created than expected. Unemployment rate is higher than expected. And there's kind of a lot to talk about with this. Now, part of this, what makes me really think about this, is Trump said that he was going to fire the person in charge of the Department of Labor because it was such a bad report. And the assertion there is that the data is not right. So on the one hand, it sounds kind of ridiculous. On the other hand, there's actually a little bit of credibility to it. And if I had another hand even after that, it kind of goes full circle to be somewhat ridiculous. So let's unpack what I'm talking about here. So is the data just bad and this person should get fired? Well, maybe not. How is it any different, being recorded any differently than it has been in the past? Well, it kind of has been. When Trump made a lot of cuts in government departments, there are fewer people that can record a lot of the things that need recording. Now, we saw this show up a few days ago in the unemployment reports, where that department especially needs to send people out in the field to look at prices, and there's fewer people to get sent out in the field. So they have to kind of infer what some of the prices are, which makes the data a little bit less reliable. So could some of that be going on here? Maybe yes, maybe no. But we also look at this report and we see that, yeah, there are fewer jobs created, and a lot of them were in healthcare, which is just one of the sectors that, because as our society gets older, fewer babies being born and more people, baby boomers getting to that older age, and people in my generation getting older as well, population gets smaller, and people who are in need of medical care gets bigger. And so that sector is just going to kind of grow naturally. So that's the new numbers that came out today, but there's still kind of yet another side to the story here as well. And that is that the labor figures for the past 2 months got revised to be worse. Even fewer jobs created than what it said for the last couple of months. So we've been seeing that quite a bit lately. And so really, a lot of the data that we're seeing ends up being sort of more generous to the market. It looks like a rosier picture to the market than it actually is when these numbers end up getting revised lower. So what does all this mean? Well, what all this means is that we used to talk about a soft landing. Remember when everybody in the whole world was talking about a soft landing? I used to call it the immaculate disinflation, where can the Fed cut rates just enough and raise them just in the nick of time, and it ends up where inflation comes down, but the economy doesn't do worse. Remember, everybody used to talk about that. And boy, oh boy, it looked like that was going to happen, but now it kind of looks like that whole thing's just getting punched in the stomach, because I don't know if we're going to have that soft landing, and I don't know if inflation is going to actually make it back down to that 2% level. Right now, it looks like inflation kind of just came down to a point, but is just being stubborn, just kind of getting stuck at that point. It was a little bit higher than we thought it was going to be last time. So that's the inflation part, just not quite getting there to that 2% level. But the employment situation, where, I mean, that was on fire for a while. The Fed, by keeping interest rates higher, wanted that to come down to prevent inflation. And that worked, but now maybe it's coming down more than people thought. So now we're in this situation. What if the Fed does cut interest rates? Now, that's what Trump has been asking for a while. Most of the Fed governors have been opposed to that. This is the first time, I just mentioned this yesterday, but as a refresher, this is the first time in like 30 years or something where 2 Fed governors dissented and actually said that they thought we should cut rates this time. If we back the information out of the CME Group's Fed funds contract, there's now about a 90% chance, 89.8% chance expected that interest rates will get cut next time around. And if we keep seeing pretty bad data, I don't know, I wouldn't be dreadfully surprised if they even cut it before the next announcement, which can happen. It's pretty historically rare, but it can happen. But they'll probably wait until the next time around. So where does that leave us? Well, it could leave us with a better situation for the housing market, for sure. That's been pretty tough for especially the younger generation to afford a house, right? With interest rates making it so much more expensive in terms of monthly payments. But what will that do to inflation? Because look, keeping interest rates this high, it has brought the economy down more, which was the intended purpose, because the expectation is that would cut inflation. But if inflation's not dropping, maybe cutting interest rates won't affect inflation, but it sure would be likely to have a positive effect on the economy. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but from a pure market standpoint, well, I wouldn't be surprised, again, now that we've jumped decidedly below the 21-day moving average, if we get a little bit more follow through, potentially next stop being the 50-day moving average. So I hope that helps. A lot to think about this weekend. This is Dan Passarelli, Trade Smart.